Take a slow breath and let it go. You have made it to another day, and that is enough. Tonight you are allowed to rest, to be held, to simply be. Let the weight of everything you have been holding begin to ease. Tonight's story is the Mapkeeper. The tower stands at the edge of the village, where the cobblestones give way to wild grass, and the wild grass gives way to the sea. It is not a tall tower, 3 stories perhaps, built of gray stone that has weathered 500 winters. The windows are narrow and deep set, and in the evenings, when the light inside is lit, they glow like amber eyes watching over the harbor. For 61 years, this tower has belonged to Maeve Farrow, and for 61 years, Maeve Farrow has drawn maps. Not the kind of maps you find in school books or folded in the glove boxes of automobiles. Not the kind generated by satellites and printed on glossy paper by machines that have never felt wind or smelled salt or washed the way morning fog settles into a valley. No, Maeve draws the other kind of maps, the kind that remember. Tonight is her last night in the tower. Tomorrow, she will hand the brass key to her granddaughter Clara, and she will walk down the winding stairs for the final time, and she will leave this place that has been her home and her work and her deepest love for more than 6 decades. But that is tomorrow. Tonight, there is still work to be done. Part 1. The workshop occupies the entire top floor of the tower. It is a circular room, perhaps 40 feet across, with windows on every side that look out upon the sea to the west, the village to the east, the distant mountains to the north, and the rolling farmland to the south. From this room, Maeve can see in every direction. She has always believed that a map maker must be able to see far, even when drawing what is near. The walls are lined with shelves, and the shelves are heavy with maps. Rolled maps tied with ribbon, flat maps pressed between boards, maps in leather cases, and maps in wooden tubes, and maps simply pinned to the wall, their edges curling slightly with age. There are thousands of them, each one drawn by Maeve's own hand over the course of her long career, each one representing weeks or months or sometimes years of careful work, each one holding a story that only she remembers. In the center of the room stands her drafting table, a massive piece of oak that her grandfather built and her mother used before her. The surface is stained with 60 years of ink, blue and black and sepia and green, the colors layered upon each other like the rings of an ancient tree. Beside the table sits a smaller desk where her tools are arranged with the precision of surgical instruments. The crow quill pens, their nibs worn to her exact preference. The compass, brass and heavy, warm from decades of handling. The straightage, ebony inlaid with silver, the magnifying glass on its articulated arm. The ink pots, each one mixed by hand from pigments she grinds herself. And in the corner, in a worn leather chair beside the fire, sits Clara. Clara is 23. She has her grandmother's gray eyes and her grandmother's steady hands, and she has been coming to this tower since she was small enough to sit on Maeve's lap and watch the magic of lines becoming places. Tonight, Clara is here to learn, not the techniques. Those she has been studying for years, practicing in her own small studio in the village, bringing her work to her grandmother for gentle correction. Tonight, Clara is here to learn what cannot be taught. She is here to learn the stories. Part 2. The first lesson. Maeve stands before the eastern wall, where the oldest maps hang. Her hands, still steady despite her 78 years, rest lightly on her hips as she surveys the collection. In the firelight, the parchment seems to glow with its own inner warmth. Do you know, she says, without turning around, what the first thing is that a map maker must understand? Clara shifts in her chair. No. Mathematics? No. The properties of ink and paper? Maeve turns. She is smiling. Loss, she says. A map maker must understand loss. Clara frowns. I do not understand. Maeve crosses to her drafting table and sits on the tall stool that has been her perch for 6 decades. She folds her hands in her lap. Every map, she says, is a record of something that is already gone. By the time the ink dries, the moment it captured has passed. The tide has shifted. The tree has grown another inch. The path has been worn a little deeper by the feet that walk it. She gestures at the walls around them. All of this, thousands of maps, they are not pictures of what is. They are pictures of what was. They are memories, Clara. Frozen memories pressed onto paper, given shape and line and color. That is why a map maker must understand loss, because we are always drawing what we have already lost, and we must love it anyway. We must love it precisely because it is gone. Clara is quiet for a long moment. The fire crackles. That is sad, she says finally. Maeve laughs, a soft sound like wind through autumn leaves. It is not sad, she says. It is beautiful. It means that what we draw matters. It means that the places we map will never be entirely lost. They will live on, here, in ink and paper, and the memory of the hand that made them. She rises and crosses to the eastern wall again. Let me show you what I mean, she says. Let me tell you about this map. Part 3. The map of tides. The map she selects is small, perhaps 18 inches square, mounted in a simple wooden frame. At first glance, it appears to be a straightforward chart of the coastline south of the village. The familiar headlands and coves are all there, rendered in delicate blue and brown ink. The depths are marked in tiny numerals. The rocks and shoals are indicated with careful symbols. But as Clara looks closer, she sees something unusual. The water is not simply blue. It is patterned with dozens of thin curving lines, almost like the contours on a topographical map, but flowing, organic, alive. What are these lines? Clara asks. Tides, says Maeve. This is the map of tides. I drew it 43 years ago for a woman named Erlies Moran. She settles into the chair beside her granddaughter, and her voice takes on the rhythm of a story long remembered. Erlies was the widow of a fisherman. Her husband Gareth had worked these waters for 30 years before his boat was caught in a sudden squall and lost. They never recovered his body. The sea kept him. Maeve pauses, her eyes on the map, For months after his death, Earlise could not sleep. She would walk to the harbor every night and stand on the pier, watching the water as if she might see his boat coming home. The women of the village worried for her. They said grief had taken her mind, but grief had not taken her mind. Grief had sharpened it. She came to me one winter evening, wrapped in her husband's old oilskin coat. She stood in this very room, and she said, "I need you to draw me a map of where he went. I need to know the paths he took across the water. I need to see the places he loved." Maeve's voice is soft now, almost a whisper. So I did. I spent 3 months learning the tides of this coast. I spoke to every fisherman who would talk to me. I studied Gareth's old logbooks, which Earlise had kept. I went out on boats myself, feeling the pull of the currents, watching how the water moved differently in different seasons. And then I drew this, not just the coastline, not just the depths, but the tides themselves, the paths the water takes, the routes Gareth would have known by heart, the way you know the hallways of your own home. Clara touches the glass covering the map, tracing one of the flowing lines with her fingertip. Did it help her? She asks. Earlise? She slept that night, Maeve says, for the first time in months. She told me later that she finally understood where he had gone. Not to any single place, but everywhere. Into the patterns of the water itself, into the tides that would flow and ebb forever, whether anyone watched them or not. She lived another 20 years. Earlise did. And every year, on the anniversary of Gareth's death, she would come here and sit with this map, and she would trace the lines of the tides, and she would tell me stories about the places they had been together. Maeve is quiet for a moment. She is gone now too, but the tides remain, and the map remains, and somewhere in all of it, so does Gareth. Part 4. The tools of the trade. The fire has burned lower now. Maeve rises and adds 2 more logs, watching the flames catch and grow before she turns back to Clara. "Let me show you the tools," she says. "You know them already, of course, but tonight, I want you to understand them differently." She crosses to the smaller desk and begins lifting each item, holding it in the firelight. "The compass," she says. "Brass. This one was made in 1847 by a craftsman in the city who has been dead for 100 years. My grandmother bought it, and she gave it to my mother, and my mother gave it to me." She opens the compass and demonstrates its movement, the 2 arms swinging smoothly, the point gleaming. "With this compass, I have drawn 10,000 circles, coastlines and islands, compass roses and scale markers. Each circle is perfect. Not because I am skilled, but because the tool is true." She sets it down and picks up a pen. "Go quill. This nib is worn to exactly the angle my hand prefers. No one else could use it properly. It has learned my pressure, my rhythm, the particular way I curve when drawing rivers." Clara nods. She has her own pens, worn to her own hand. "The straightage," Maeve continues, lifting the ebony ruler inlaid with silver, "for borders and grids and the frames that hold a map together. A map without a frame is just a drawing. The frame says, "This is a place. This is bounded. This has edges and limits. This can be known." She sets it down and picks up a small glass pot of ink. "And this, the blue. I make this myself, from lapis lazuli, ground to powder, and mixed with gum arabic and a little honey to keep it flowing. This blue is the color of the sea on a clear day in late summer. I have been making it the same way for 60 years." She holds the pot up to the firelight, and the ink inside glows like a captured piece of sky. "These are not just tools, Clara. They are partners. They are extensions of the hand and eye and heart. When you draw a map, you are not alone. You are working with the accumulated skill of everyone who made these objects, everyone who used them before you, everyone who will use them after." She sets the ink pot down gently. "Tomorrow, they will be yours. All of them. Treat them as I have treated them, and they will serve you for another 60 years. Clara's eyes are bright in the firelight. "I will," she says. "I promise." Part 5. The map of memory, the next map Maeve selects, is larger, nearly 3 feet across. It shows a village, but not one Clara recognizes. The houses are arranged around a central green, and there is a church with a tall steeple, and a river that curves through the eastern edge, and fields stretching out beyond the last buildings. But the rendering is unusual. Some parts are detailed with extraordinary precision. Every stone of the church tower visible, every tree in the churchyard individually drawn. Other parts are vague, almost dreamlike, the lines fading into suggestion and mist. "This," says Maeve, "is the map of memory. I drew it 31 years ago for a man named Thomas Arda." She settles back into her chair. Thomas was a retired professor, a historian, ironically, a man who had spent his life preserving the memories of others, but his own memory was failing. The doctors called it a slow forgetting. Each day, a little more slipped away. She pauses, her hands folded in her lap. "He came to me because he wanted to remember his childhood village. He had grown up in a small place far to the north, a place that no longer exists. It was flooded decades ago when they built a dam. The village is underwater now, lost beneath a reservoir." Thomas could still remember some things clearly. The church where he was baptized, the green where he played as a boy, his grandmother's house with the red door and the climbing roses. Maeve gestures at the map, so I drew what he remembered. The clear parts are clear, the fading parts are fading. I did not invent what he had lost. I simply showed the truth of his memory with all its gaps and uncertainties. Clara studies the map, the way it shifts from precision to fog. Did it help him? For a time, Maeve says. He would sit with the map for hours, and sometimes the act of looking would bring things back. He would suddenly remember the name of a street or the color of a neighbor's front door, and I would add it to the map. We worked on it together for 3 years, filling in pieces as they returned to him. But the forgetting was stronger than the remembering. Eventually, he could no longer recognize the map at all. He did not know what village it showed. He did not remember coming to me. He did not remember his own name. Maeve's voice is very quiet now. His daughter kept the map. She told me, after he died, that she would sit beside his bed and describe it to him. The church with the tall steeple, the green where children played, the river curving through, and sometimes, just for a moment, his eyes would clear, and she would see him there, inside the memory, even though the words were gone. She is silent for a long moment. That is what maps can do, Clara. They can hold a place even after the place is gone. They can hold a memory even after the mind that made it has forgotten. Part 6. The Map of Seasons. Clara wipes her eyes and takes a steadying breath. Tell me another, she says. Please. I want to hear more. Maeve smiles. She rises and crosses to the northern wall, where a series of 4 maps hang together in matching frames. These, she says, are the map of seasons. 4 maps of the same place, one for each season of the year. I drew them 52 years ago for myself. The maps show a small valley tucked between 2 hills. In each one, the valley is recognizable. The same stream winds through the center. The same cottage sits at the northern edge. The same stand of birch trees marks the southern slope. But everything else is different. This is the valley where I grew up, Maeve says. Before I came to this village. Before I met Alec. Before I knew what my life would become. She points to the first map. Spring. You can see the wildflowers just beginning to bloom. The stream is swollen with snowmelt from the hills. The birch trees are putting out their first leaves, that pale green that exists for only a few weeks before it deepens. She moves to the second. Summer. The valley is thick with growth. The grass is high. The stream has quieted. My mother's garden is producing tomatoes and beans and squash. You can see them here, tiny dots of color beside the cottage. The third map, autumn. The birches have turned gold. The stream is lower still. There is a haze over the valley, the smoke from harvest fires, the particular light of October afternoons. The garden has been cleared. The earth is dark where it has been turned. And the fourth, winter. The valley is white. The stream is frozen. The birches are bare, their branches like black lace against the sky. The cottage has smoke rising from the chimney. Everything is simplified. Everything is waiting. Clara studies the 4 maps, seeing how they captured the same place in 4 different moments. Why did you draw these? She asks. Maeve is quiet for a moment. I was homesick, she says finally. I had just arrived in this village. I was young and alone, and I missed my family terribly. I missed the valley where I had grown up, the rhythms of the seasons, the way the light changed through the year. So I drew it, all 4 seasons from memory. And as I drew, something happened. The homesickness did not go away, but it changed. It became something I could hold, something outside of myself, something I could look at instead of feeling it swallowing me whole. She turns to Clara. That is another thing maps can do. They can transform what is inside us into something outside us. They can take the formless ache of longing and give it shape. And once something has shape, we can carry it without being crushed. Clara nods slowly. I understand, she says. You will need this, Maeve says. This skill of making the inside into the outside. There will be times when the work is hard, and the loneliness is great, and you wonder why you chose this path. When those times come, draw what you feel. Give it lines and colors and names, and it will become bearable. Part 7. The naming of places. Maeve returns to her chair by the fire. There is something else I want to teach you tonight, she says. Something about names. Clara leans forward. When you draw a map, Maeve says, you must decide what to call things. Rivers and mountains and villages and streets. This seems simple, but it is not. Names have power. The name you give a place shapes how people think about it. A river called Sweetwater is different from a river called Black Run, even if they are the same river. She pauses, gathering her thoughts. For a long time, map makers in this part of the world used the names that powerful people gave them. The king's name for the forest, the lord's name for the mountain. These names were often about ownership, about conquest, about who had claimed what. But when I began drawing maps, I made a different choice. I decided to ask the people who lived in these places what they called them. Not the lords and the officials, but the farmers and the fishermen and the old women who remembered stories their grandmothers had told. She gestures at the maps on the walls. You will find, in my maps, names that appear on no other charts. Dead Man's Cove, where the fishermen say a ghost ship runs aground on stormy nights. The Singing Rocks, where the wind makes a sound like voices if you listen at dawn. Grandmother's Hill, named for a woman who walked there every day for 80 years. These names are not official. They are not in any registry, but they are true. They capture something real about these places, something that the official names miss. Clara is writing in a small notebook she has produced from her pocket. I will remember, she says. Good, May says, because a map without true names is just a picture. It shows the shape of places, but not their soul. And it is the soul we are really trying to capture. Always the soul. Part 8. The long commission now. Maeve says, let me tell you about the longest commission I ever accepted. She settles deeper into her chair. 23 years ago, a man came to me with an unusual request. His name was Sebastian Vaux, and he was a collector of rare books and manuscripts. He had heard of my work and traveled from the city to find me. He wanted a map of the world. Clara's eyes widen. The entire world? Not exactly. He wanted a map of the world as it was known in the year 1500, before the great explorations, before the coastlines were charted and the continents connected. He wanted to show what people believed the world looked like at that moment in history. Maeve rises and crosses to a large cabinet she has not yet opened. She unlocks it with a small key and withdraws a massive rolled document, nearly 6 feet long when furled. It took me 7 years to complete, she says. 7 years of research and drawing and revision. I studied every map I could find from that era. I read the accounts of travelers and the theories of scholars. I learned what they knew and what they did not know, what they believed and what they feared. She unrolls the map slowly, and Clara helps her spread it across the drafting table. The map is extraordinary. Europe is recognizable, though the coastlines are slightly wrong. Africa is distorted, larger in some places, smaller in others. Asia sprawls east into vagueness, and the oceans are filled with illustrations, sea serpents and whales, mermaids and ships with billowing sails. At the edges, where the known world ends, there are warnings written in careful script. Here be dragons, terra incognita. Beyond here, no one has returned. This is beautiful, Clara whispers. It is a map of ignorance, Maeve says. A map of what people did not know. And that is why Sebastian wanted it. He said that our maps of the known world are everywhere, but our maps of the unknown are being lost. We forget how much we once did not understand. We forget that the world was a mystery. She traces one of the sea serpents with her fingertip. When I drew these creatures, I was not lying. I was recording what people believed. They really thought sea serpents lived in the deep oceans. They really feared sailing too far west. Their fear was real, even if the monsters were not. This map is a record of that fear, and fear is important to remember. It reminds us that we are still surrounded by the unknown, that our maps, for all their precision, still have edges, that there is always more to discover. Clara stares at the map for a long time. What happened to Sebastian? She asks. He died 8 years ago, Maeve says. He left his collection to a museum in the city. This map hangs there now most of the year. They loan it back to me sometimes, so I can show it to students. She begins to roll the map again. He was a kind man. He understood something that many people do not. That maps are not just tools. They are windows into the minds of the people who made them. They show not just where places are, but how people thought about places, how they dreamed about them, how they feared them. That is worth preserving. That is worth 7 years of work. Part 9. Midnight tea. The tower clock strikes 12. Maeve rises stiffly from her chair and crosses to the small alcove where she keeps a kettle and a tin of tea. Her movements are slower than they once were, but still graceful, still precise. Tea, she says. I have made tea in this room at midnight more times than I can count. There is something about the deep hours that is good for map making. The world is quiet. The mind settles. The hand moves without thinking. She prepares 2 cups, adding honey from a small pot, and brings them to where Clara sits. Drink, she says. We have more stories to tell, and you will want something warm. They sit together in silence for a few minutes, sipping their tea, watching the fire. Outside, the wind has picked up. They can hear it moving around the tower, finding the gaps in the old stone, whistling softly through the narrow windows. I love this sound, Clara says quietly. The wind around the tower. It sounds like the building is breathing. Maeve smiles. It is breathing, she says. Everything old breathes. Everything that has stood for a long time takes on a kind of life. This tower has seen 500 years of storms. It has sheltered mapmakers through wars and plagues and winters that lasted half the year. It knows things we do not know. It remembers things we have forgotten. She sets down her cup. That is why you must listen to it. When you are working, and the wind moves like this, pay attention. Let the sound of the tower become part of your work. Let its breathing enter your hand. Clara nods slowly. I will try. You will not try, Maeve says gently. You will simply do. That is the difference between trying and doing. Trying thinks too much. Doing listens. Part 10. The map of farewells. They sit in companionable silence for a while, the tea warming their hands. Then Clara speaks. Grandmother, may I ask you something? Of course. Of all the maps you have drawn, which one was the hardest? Not technically, emotionally. Maeve is quiet for a long moment. When she speaks, her voice is softer than before. There is a map I have never shown anyone, not even you. It is in the drawer of my personal desk, beneath the letters I have saved from your grandfather. I drew it 30 years ago, over the course of a single winter. It shows all the places where I have said goodbye to people I loved. Clara waits, not speaking. There is the train station where I said goodbye to my mother, the last time I ever saw her. She was returning to the valley where I grew up, and I stayed here. I did not know it would be the last time. You never do. There is the harbor where I stood when my brother sailed away to seek his fortune in another country. He wrote letters for 2 years, and then the letters stopped, and I never learned what happened to him. There is the hospital room where I sat with your grandfather's hand in mine, watching him breathe, and then watching him not breathe. Maeve's voice catches just slightly. There is the churchyard where we buried my first child, the one who lived only 3 days. Your mother never knew she had a brother who came before her. Clara reaches out and takes her grandmother's hand. The map of farewells is not beautiful, Maeve says. It is not carefully drawn. It is rough and blotched in places where tears fell on the paper before the ink was dry. But it is the most honest map I have ever made. Why did you draw it? Clara asks softly. Because I needed to. Because the farewells were piling up inside me, and I could not carry them all in my heart. I needed to put them somewhere. I needed to give them a place. She squeezes Clara's hand. That is the hardest lesson a map maker learns. We cannot only draw the beautiful places. We cannot only record the happy memories. Sometimes we must draw the places of loss. Sometimes we must map our own grief. And when we do, something strange happens. The grief does not disappear, but it becomes smaller. Or rather, we become larger. Large enough to contain it. Large enough to keep living. Clara is crying quietly, the tears running down her cheeks without sound. You will have farewells of your own, Maeve says gently. Everyone does. When they come, remember what I have told you. Draw them. Let the paper hold what your heart cannot hold alone. Part 11. The blank map after they finish their tea. Maeve leads Clara to the western wall. Here, the maps are different. Many are unfinished, their coastlines trailing off into blank parchment. Some show only the faintest sketches, suggestions of places rather than renderings. And one frame holds nothing but an empty sheet of cream-colored paper. What is this? Clara asks. Maeve stands before the blank frame for a long moment before answering. This is the map of nowhere, she says, or the map of not yet. I have never been able to decide what to call it. She touches the frame gently. When I was young, maybe 30, I became convinced that I should draw a map of a place that did not exist. Not a fantasy, not an invention, but a real place that simply had not been discovered yet. I thought that if I could imagine it perfectly enough, if I could feel its shape and its coastlines and its rivers, I could draw it into being. She laughed softly. I was young. I believed in magic more than I believe now. What happened? Clara asks. I sat before this paper for 3 months, Maeve says. I held my pen. I closed my eyes. I tried to feel the place that wanted to be drawn, and nothing came. The paper remained blank. The place refused to reveal itself. She turns to face Clara. Eventually, I understood. A map maker does not create places. A map maker only records what is already there. We are not gods. We are witnesses. We do not make the world. We simply pay attention to it more carefully than most people do, and we write down what we see. But I kept the blank paper. I framed it and hung it here as a reminder that there are always places we have not yet seen, places waiting to be discovered, places that exist beyond the edges of what we know. She pauses, and a reminder of humility. We map makers have power. We name things. We decide what is important enough to include and what can be left out. That is a dangerous kind of power. The blank map reminds me that I do not know everything, that I never will. Clara stares at the empty frame. It is beautiful, she says quietly. Yes, Maeve agrees. The most beautiful map I have never drawn. Part 8. The night deepens, the fire has burned down to embers. Maeve does not add more wood. The tower is warm enough, and there is something appropriate about the dimming light as the night grows old. She has been standing for a long time, and her bones ache with the particular weariness of age. She lowers herself into the chair beside Clara and lets out a long breath. I am tired, she admits. More tired than I have ever been. Clara reaches over and takes her grandmother's hand. The skin is thin and soft, marked with age spots and the faint scars of 1,000 small cuts from quill knives and compass points. You do not have to leave, Clara says. You could stay. We could work together. Maeve shakes her head slowly. No, child. There is a time for staying and a time for going. I have stayed long enough, 61 years in this tower. 61 years of ink and paper, and the slow, patient work of watching the world and writing it down. She squeezes Clara's hand. Now, it is time for you. Time for your eyes to see what mine are too old to see. Time for your hands to draw what mine are too stiff to draw. The maps you will make, Clara, they will be maps I could never imagine. They will show places I have never been, in ways I have never thought to show them. That is how it should be. The old must give way to the young. The teacher must step back for the student. Otherwise, nothing changes. Otherwise, the maps become stale, repeating the same lines, missing the new paths. She is quiet for a moment. I am proud of you, she says. I have always been proud of you. But tonight, especially, I want you to know. Clara's eyes are wet. She does not speak. They sit together in the low light, the grandmother and the granddaughter, their hands intertwined. After a while, Maeve speaks again, her voice distant, as if she is talking to herself as much as to Clara. You know what I will miss most? Clara shakes her head. The making of inks. She smiles faintly. People think the maps are the work. But the maps are only the end of the work. The beginning is much quieter. It is grinding the pigments, mixing the gum Arabic, testing the consistency on scraps of paper, getting the color exactly right. I have spent more hours making ink than I have spent drawing. Hours of quiet, repetitive work. My hands moving through the same motions they have moved through 10,000 times. The pestle in the mortar. The slow addition of the binding agent. The testing and adjusting and testing again. She looks at her hands, folded in her lap. That is what I will miss. Not the grand gestures, not the finished maps on the walls, but the small, invisible work that no one sees. The preparation, the waiting, the patient attention to things that seem unimportant, but are actually everything. Clara nods slowly. I understand, she says. The inks you gave me, they feel different from any I have bought. They have weight, yes, Maeve says, because they are made with attention. Every grain of pigment was placed there deliberately. Every drop of gum was measured and considered. The ink knows it was made by someone who cared. She is quiet for a moment. Take care of the inks, Clara. Keep making them the old way. It would be easier to buy them, I know. But something would be lost. Something invisible, but essential. I will, Clara says. I promise. Part 12. The map of the last journey there is one more map. Maeve rises, moving carefully, and crosses to a small cabinet in the corner of the room. She opens it and removes a single rolled parchment tied with a faded blue ribbon. I have not shown this to anyone, she says. Not in 37 years. She unrolls the map on the drafting table, weighting the corners with smooth stones she keeps for the purpose. The map shows a walking path. It begins at a small cottage, drawn in fine detail, winds through a meadow, dotted with wildflowers, crosses a stream by means of a wooden footbridge, climbs a gentle hill, passes through a grove of oaks, and ends at a stone bench overlooking the sea. This is the map of the last journey, Maeve says. I drew it 40 years ago when my husband Alec was still alive. Her voice is very soft now, barely above a whisper. Alec loved to walk. Every evening, after dinner, he would take this path from our cottage to the bench on the headland. He would sit there and watch the sun go down, and then he would walk home in the blue light of dusk. He did it every day for 30 years. She traces the path with her fingertip. I drew this map as a gift for his 60th birthday. I walked the path myself 100 times, measuring and noting and recording every detail, the exact location of each oak in the grove, the pattern of stones on the footbridge, the wildflowers that bloomed in spring, the ones that bloomed in summer, the ones that held on into autumn. He loved it. He kept it on the wall of his study. He said it was the best gift anyone had ever given him. She is quiet for a long moment. He died 3 years later. A sudden illness. There was no warning. He was here, and then he was gone. Her voice catches just slightly. For a long time, I could not walk the path. I could not even look at the map. The pain was too great. I put it away in this cabinet, and I did not open it for decades. She looks at Clara, but last week I took it out. I unrolled it, and I looked at it, really looked at it, for the first time in so long. And do you know what I felt? Clara shakes her head. Gratitude, Maeve says. Not grief. Gratitude. Gratitude for the years we had. Gratitude for every evening he walked that path. Gratitude that I was able to record it, to keep it, to hold it here in ink and paper so that it would never be entirely lost. She begins to roll the map again, slowly, carefully. Tomorrow morning before I leave the tower, I am going to walk this path. For the first time since Alec died, I am going to follow the route I drew all those years ago, and I am going to sit on that stone bench, and I am going to watch the sun rise, and I am going to say goodbye. She ties the ribbon, and then I am going to give this map to you. Clara's tears are falling now, silent and steady. Grandmother, she whispers. No, Maeve says gently. No sadness. This is not sad. This is as it should be. The map will continue. The path will continue. And somewhere in all of it, Alec will continue too. Walking in the evening light, sitting on his bench, watching the sun go down over the water. She crosses to Clara and kisses her forehead. That is the final lesson, she says. The most important one. Maps are not about places. They are about love. Every line is an act of love. Every careful measurement is a way of saying, this matters. This is worth recording. This is worth remembering. If you remember nothing else I have taught you, remember that. Part 13. The hour before dawn, the night is nearly over. Outside the windows, the darkness has begun to soften. The deep, black giving way to the first hints of gray. The stars are fading. The world is preparing to wake. Clara has fallen asleep in her chair, exhausted by the long night, her head resting on her arm, her breath slow and even. Maeve sits beside her, not sleeping, simply watching. She has been watching this child, this woman, since Clara was small enough to fit in the crook of her arm. She has watched her grow and learn and struggle and succeed. She has watched her hands develop the steadiness needed for map making. She has watched her eyes develop the seeing. And now it is time to let go. Maeve rises quietly, not wanting to wake her granddaughter. She crosses to the drafting table one last time and stands before it, her hands resting on the familiar oak surface. How many hours has she spent at this table? How many thousands of hours bent over the parchment, guiding the quill, watching the lines appear? Enough hours to fill a lifetime. Enough hours to fill several lifetimes. She opens the drawer where she keeps her most precious inks and removes a small bottle she has been saving for this moment. The ink inside is a deep gold, made from a pigment so rare she has only enough for a single use. She takes a fresh sheet of parchment and pins it to the table. She picks up her crow quill and dips it in the golden ink, and she begins to draw. Not a map of any place that exists, a map of this moment. The tower in the first light of dawn, the sea beyond the windows, the figure of Clara sleeping in the chair, the embers of the fire, the thousands of maps on the walls, each one a story, each one a memory, each one a love. She draws quickly, instinctively, not measuring, not planning, just letting the pen move where it wants to move. The lines flow from her hand as if they have been waiting inside her for years, finally released. When she finishes, the first rays of sunlight are streaming through the eastern windows. She looks at what she has drawn. It is not perfect. There are mistakes. There are places where the line wavers, places where the proportion is wrong, places where her old eyes and stiff hands have betrayed her. But it is true. It is the truest map she has ever drawn. She sets down the pen and blows gently on the ink to dry it. Then she takes the map and places it on the small table beside Clara's sleeping form, where she will find it when she wakes. A final gift. A map of this moment. A map of love. Part 14. The descent Maeve takes the brass key from its hook by the door. She has hung it there every night for 61 years. Every night, she has locked the door at the top of the stairs and hung the key on this hook and gone to sleep knowing that her workshop was safe. Tonight, she will not hang it back. Tonight, she will take it with her, down the winding stairs, out into the morning, and she will place it in Clara's hand when she wakes. But first, she will walk the path. She opens the door quietly, not wanting to wake her granddaughter. The stone stairs spiral down into darkness, but she knows them so well she does not need light. Her feet find the worn grooves of each step, the places where 500 years of footsteps have shaped the stone. Down and down she goes, past the second floor, where the older maps are stored, the ones too fragile for the workshop, kept in special cases that protect them from light and damp. Past the first floor, where the greeting room sits, where clients once came to commission maps, and now only Clara comes, carrying her sketches, asking her questions. Down to the heavy oak door at the base of the tower. She opens it and steps outside. The morning is cool and fresh. The grass is wet with dew. The sky is the pale pink and gold of early dawn. The sun just below the horizon. The world held in that breathless moment before the day truly begins. Maeve stands still for a moment, breathing in the salt air, feeling the breeze on her face. Then she begins to walk. Part 15. The path, the cottage where she and Alec lived, is a short walk from the tower. It is small and white, with a blue door and window boxes that Clara has planted with herbs. Maeve does not live there anymore. Has not lived there since Alec died. But she has never been able to sell it. She comes sometimes just to sit in the garden and remember. This morning, she does not stop. She walks past the cottage and into the meadow beyond. The wildflowers are not blooming yet. It is too early in the year, but she can see where they will be in a few months when the warmth comes. The pink of clover, the yellow of buttercups, the blue of forget-me-nots. She drew them all 40 years ago. Every species, every color, every placement. The path is not marked, but she knows it. Her feet find it as surely as they found the tower stairs. Her body remembers even when her mind is elsewhere. She crosses the meadow slowly, not because she is tired, but because she wants to feel every step. She wants to notice every blade of grass, every bird call, every breath of wind. This is what Alec did. Every evening, this slow, attentive walking, this presence in the world. The footbridge over the stream is just as she drew it. The wooden planks are weathered and gray, but they are solid. The supports driven deep into the banks. The stream below is clear and cold, moving quickly toward the sea. She pauses at the center of the bridge and looks down at the water. There were days after Alec died when she thought she would never feel peace again. Days when the grief was so heavy she could not rise from her bed. Days when she looked at her maps and saw only emptiness, only loss, only the terrible truth that everything ends. But those days passed, not because she forgot, not because the grief went away, but because she kept working. She kept drawing. She kept paying attention to the world, and the world slowly taught her how to live again. That is the gift of this work. It requires presence. It requires attention. It requires being here, in this moment, with this pen on this paper, drawing this line. And if you are here, truly here, then the grief cannot consume you entirely. There is always something else. There is always the next line to draw. She continues across the bridge. Part 16. The grove of oaks is old. Older than the tower. Older than the village. Some of these trees have been standing for 1,000 years. Their trunks so wide it would take 4 people holding hands to encircle them. Maeve walks among them slowly. She drew each of these trees. She knows their shapes, their particular lean, the way their branches reach toward the light. She gave them names in her map, names that only she and Alec knew. The dancing one, with its twisted trunk. The guardian, standing at the edge of the grove. The lovers, two trees grown together until their bark merged. She stops beside the lovers and places her hand on the bark. "Hello," she says quietly. "I have not visited in a long time. I am sorry." The trees do not answer, of course, but the wind moves through their leaves, and it sounds almost like a reply. She continues through the grove, climbing the gentle hill beyond, her breath coming a little harder now, her old legs feeling the slope. But she does not stop. She will not stop until she reaches the bench. Part 17. The bench, and there it is. The stone bench on the headland, overlooking the sea. Alec's bench. It is just as she drew it. Gray stone, weathered but solid, facing west toward the water. The grass around it is short and salt-burned. The wind is stronger here, carrying the smell of the sea and the sound of the waves breaking on the rocks below. Maeve stands before the bench for a long moment. She has imagined this moment so many times. She has dreamed of it, feared it, longed for it, and now it is here. And it is both simpler and more profound than she imagined. She sits down. The stone is cold beneath her. The wind tugs at her hair. The sea stretches out before her, gray and vast, all the way to the horizon and beyond. She closes her eyes, and she feels him. Not as a ghost, not as a haunting, but as a presence, the accumulated weight of all those evenings he sat in this exact spot, watching this exact view, breathing this exact air. 30 years of evenings layered upon each other, soaked into the stone. He is here. He has always been here. He will always be here. Maeve opens her eyes. The sun is rising, the first edge of it cresting the horizon behind her, sending golden light streaming across the water. "I came," she says aloud. To no one, to him, to herself, to the world. "I finally came." She watches the light change on the water. "I drew so many maps," she says, "thousands of them. But this one, this path, this bench, this view, this was always the most important one. Because it was yours, because you loved it, because every line I drew was really a way of drawing you. The waves break on the rocks below. I'm going now," she says, leaving the tower, giving it to Clara. She will be good at it. Better than me, maybe. She sees things I cannot see. She pauses. But I wanted to come here first, to say thank you for all of it, for the walking and the watching and the years, for teaching me how to pay attention, for giving me something to draw that mattered. The wind moves around her. "I love you," she says. "I have always loved you. I will always love you." She sits in silence for a long time, watching the sea, feeling the sun warm her face, letting the moment be exactly what it is. An ending and a beginning. Part 18. The return, the walk back is easier. The path is downhill, and the sun is fully up now, warming the air, drying the dew. The world is awake, birds singing, rabbits darting through the meadow, smoke rising from chimneys in the village below. Maeve walks slowly, but with a lightness she has not felt in years. Something has shifted inside her. Something has been set down. Not the love, not the memory, but the weight of carrying it alone. She has shared it now with the bench, with the sea, with the wind. She has given it back to the place where it belongs. And she is lighter for it. When she reaches the tower, the door is open. Clara is standing in the doorway, the golden map in her hands, tears on her face. "You drew this," she says. "While I was sleeping, you drew this." Maeve nods. "It is my last map," she says. "The last one I will ever draw. I wanted it to be of this moment. Of you. Of everything we shared last night." Clara crosses to her grandmother and embraces her. They stand together in the doorway, the old woman and the young, the past and the future, the keeper and the one who will keep. "Thank you," Clara whispers, "for everything, for the maps and the stories and the tools, for trusting me, for loving me." Maeve holds her tight. "Thank you," she says, "for being here, for learning, for carrying it forward." She steps back and holds out the brass key. "It is yours now," she says. "The tower, the workshop, the maps, all of it." Clara takes the key. It is warm from her grandmother's hand. "I will take care of it," she says. "I promise. I know you will," Maeve says. "I have always known." Epilogue. The map continues. The tower still stands at the edge of the village, where the cobblestones give way to wild grass, and the wild grass gives way to the sea. In the evenings, when the light inside is lit, the windows still glow like amber eyes watching over the harbor. Clara works there now. She sits at the oak drafting table, stained with 100 years of ink, and she draws maps. Maps of coastlines and rivers and mountains, maps of villages and cities and paths through the woods, maps of tides and memories and places that exist only in dreams. On the eastern wall, beside the map of tides and the map of memory, there is a new map now. It shows a tower in the first light of dawn. It shows a figure sleeping in a chair. It shows embers in a fireplace and thousands of maps on the walls. It shows love, and beside it, in a simple wooden frame, there is another map. It shows a path from a cottage, through a meadow, over a stream, through a grove of oaks, up a gentle hill, to a stone bench overlooking the sea. Clara walks that path sometimes. In the evening, when her work is done, she follows the route her grandmother drew all those years ago. She crosses the footbridge and passes through the grove and climbs the hill and sits on the stone bench and watches the sun go down. And she thinks about maps, about how they are not just pictures of places, about how they are records of love frozen in ink and paper, about how they hold the people who made them, and the people who are gone, and the people who will come after. She thinks about her grandmother, walking this same path, sitting on this same bench, watching this same light on this same water. And she feels her there, not as a ghost, not as a haunting, but as a presence, the accumulated weight of attention and care and love, soaked into the land, held in the map, continuing, always continuing. That is what maps do. That is what map makers do. They continue. And now, gentle listener, the hour is late. The fire has burned low in the tower. The maps hang silent on the walls. The wind moves softly around the old stone, and the sea rolls endlessly against the shore. It is time to rest, time to let your eyes close, time to let your breath slow, time to let go of the day and all its busyness, all its demands, all its maps still waiting to be drawn. There will be time for that tomorrow. For now, there is only this moment, this breath, this gentle drift towards sleep. Let the images of the story settle in your mind like ink settling on paper. The tower in the evening light, the workshop filled with maps, the old woman and her granddaughter passing the key from one hand to the other. Let them become a kind of map themselves, a map of this night, a map of peace. And know that somewhere, in a tower by the sea, the light is still burning. Someone is still paying attention to the world, recording its beauty, preserving its memory. That is enough. That is more than enough. Sleep now. Sleep knowing that the maps continue, that the love continues, that nothing we notice, nothing we truly see is ever entirely lost. Buffy's story ends. Silence holds the space where the words once were.